What's going on, my fellow Kino Lords? So I just got out of a screening for Evil Dead Rise, and going into this film, I kind of thought to myself, it's kind of tough being, or it's at least tough trying to be an Evil Dead movie nowadays, just because I feel like a lot of what people loved about the original Evil Dead movies are very era specific. Not only in regards to what Sam Raimi was able to do with a low budget, and obviously just the abundance of practical effects and prosthetics and everything like that. That is a huge part of it. But another huge element of it was how it embraced its campiness. There's like a huge element of just wackiness and silliness to it that I think, at least from my understanding, a lot of Evil Dead fans really enjoyed. I know that's what I really love from those films. So, nowadays, when, studios are trying to make an Evil Dead movie, basically, the camp is completely removed from it, or at least, like, the vast majority of the campiness that's present in the original Evil Dead movies, it's removed. So nowadays, they kind of replaced the campiness with a more sincere approach to like the characters and story and overall atmosphere, while still keeping all of the balls out gore and violence that people do love from the Evil Dead movies. And here with Evil Dead Rise, that is exactly the case. And I think it does it pretty well, honestly. I think that there's enough here for Evil Dead fans to enjoy, and there's also enough here for just your casual audience wanting a batshit gory horror film. There's enough there for that audience to also get something out of it as well. So like in that regard, I do think that this film is effective. I definitely like this a lot better than the Evil Dead remake that we got back in, I think, 2013. When I first watched that film in theaters, I liked it, but upon rewatch a few years ago, it didn't hold up at all. And even though it has some elements to it that I thought were, that at least I admired on some level, overall, I just didn't like the movie. Thought there were a lot of elements that were flat. But here, I think, obviously, as I mentioned, it has a more sincere approach to its story and characters, and I think on many levels in that regard, it does a lot of things better than the first attempt at a remake did back in 2013. Overall, I like the characters more. I like how this film went about its sincere atmosphere more. And, I also like the way how it incorporates a lot of the original elements of the Evil Dead movies into this film in a more like modern day setting. Like, there's a lot of like iconic things from the original Evil Dead films, like when it comes to the vinyl record and the voiceover that's in the vinyl record that basically calls to the uprising of the demons. That was incorporated in a pretty interesting way, within a character that's in this film. It felt oddly natural, which is very hard to do, especially with this type of concept. The way that they incorporated the Necronomicon, I thought, was kind of clever, actually. And also, one thing that people really loved about the original Evil Dead was that it takes place in one location, and they do that here. Instead of a cabin in the woods, they're basically stuck in a fucking rundown apartment. And it works really well. There's like several callbacks to the original Evil Dead, but in a slightly different way. Like instead of the demon being trapped in a basement cellar, in this one she's basically trapped outside the door, and we kind of peep through the doors like peephole. And we kind of get a similar scene that we would get from the original Evil Dead, except through that lens. And there's several elements of that I did admire from this film. And so, honestly, I do have to give this film quite a bit of credit on that regard, and honestly on many regards, because I found myself to be quite engaged throughout the film. You know, I didn't find much of this film boring or flat. I mean, there was maybe some elements, again, of that sincerity that, you know, didn't really work for me. But I mean, look, the blood is there. There's red fluids. There's fucking black fluids. There's white vomit fluids. The only thing it was really missing was some green fluid. I was hoping for some green, but we didn't get that. But I mean, yeah, this film delivered in terms of the gore and the violence and, you know, some of the batshit violence and gore. I mean, it is there in this film. It just, honestly, like, my main issue with this movie is the fact that it doesn't really feel all the way like an Evil Dead movie. And I know that might be not the fairest complaint, but there's still a spirit to the Evil Dead films that are just missing in these new remakes. And again, I think it goes back to that element of wackiness and camp that I just kind of really want to see. And I understand why it's not really, like, I understand why studios aren't really incorporating much of that, because campy horror isn't something that's really in for modern audiences. That's not really something that they're accustomed to. That's not really, they probably know that if they went all the way with its wackiness, they really wouldn't like it. They probably just write it off as just like, you know, a dumb, shitty horror movie or something. But, you know, at this point, I kind of wish we did have something that was almost like, kind of like all in for the fans. And if the audiences, and if casual audiences don't like it, then that's okay. But I really want something that is just as out there with its camp as the originals were. You know, Evil Dead 2 just went all the way out there with, you know, being silly and wacky, but still being fucking creepy in a lot of different ways. And, you know, we're not really getting that with these new movies. And it's, like I said, it's making it feel less of an Evil Dead movie and more of just like a crazy demonic possession movie with Evil Dead callbacks. And, you know, again, it sucks because this film is effective. It does everything that it needs to do, and that's really great and everything, and I enjoyed myself. But do I ever see myself really rewatching this movie? Probably not. But again, that doesn't mean that it was a bad movie. I do think it's a good movie. But, you know, I guess at this point, I would like something that's a little bit more embracing the spirit of what it was, and something really for the fans that loved it. But, I mean, casual audiences are getting a lot out of it. Everybody in my screening, even though they were terrible and talking and giggling and being stupid the whole time, they seemed to really enjoy it by the end of it. But, anyway, yeah, look, this film delivers the gore. It delivers the the batshit gore and violence. I really need to make that clear that it's not just gore. It kind of goes really far with certain things, which is good because that's what the originals did. I think the sincerity works a lot better than its previous attempt. And I think it does incorporate a lot of the original elements, like the more iconic elements of the originals, you know, into this modern narrative smoothly. And again, like, it does deliver on a crazy kind of like climactic gore fest that, you know, is enjoyable. So, I mean, I'll give Evil Dead Rise a very soft 7 out of 10. You know, again, kind of a generous soft 7, but I feel like my gripes are not necessarily fair to the film's merit itself, because what it was going for is, I mean, it achieved exactly what it was going for, and I think it's more fair to kind of assess it on that level. So yeah, either way, I'm surprised that it's even enjoyable. This one could have been complete dog shit, and it wasn't, so that's awesome. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Evil Dead Rise. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.